members of the working group, honored guests, distinguished participants, thank you for having me here. Before I proceed any further, I would like to acknowledge the following people. Ms. Heng Chanta, a 14-year-old Cambodian girl who was killed on May 16th during a crackdown against villagers trying to prevent their land from being grabbed. Mr. Mam Sonando, who was sentenced to 20 years jail on October 1st for advocating for the rights of Ms. Heng Chanta's community. Ms. Venetia Natinga Nestor, who was shot dead in broad daylight on a public highway in the Philippines on June 19th for being a strong voice against land grabbing. Mrs. Juvi Capion, an indigenous leader, and her two sons, Jordan, aged 13, and John, aged 8, who were killed on October 18th at their home in the Philippines. Mrs. Capion and her husband, Daguil Capion, opposed mining in the ancestral domain of the Belaan tribe. Ms. Mao Hengfeng, a Shanghai housing activist and promoter of women's reproductive rights, now serving a sentence of hard labor. Mr. Ismail Solorio Uratia, the leader of a farmers' organization opposing a mining project, and his wife, Manuela Marta Solis Contreras, who were assassinated on October 22 in Mexico. Mr. Jose Tavico Zunun, a leader of the indigenous Quiche people opposing mega projects, who was shot dead at his home on June 19th in Guatemala. Mr. Aminul Haq Islam, a 41-year-old labor activist from Bangladesh, who was assassinated in April after being abducted and severely tortured. Thai conservation activist Mr. Tongnak Sawek-Chinanda, who was shot dead in July last year. These men, women, and children were killed or jailed because they were trying to stop human rights abuses linked to business activities. In most of the murder cases, which took place since the adoption of the UN Guiding Principles, no one has been convicted. Instead, criminalization and repression for those who seek to address the ill effects of business activities is continuing and seems to be increasing in some areas. It is imperative that this trend of repression be addressed, denounced, and halted, and that would be an incredible achievement of this forum. Although the right to an effective remedy for victims is embodied in the UN Guiding Principles, access to justice has not been prioritized. In too many of the situations I have described, those responsible have not been brought to account. Prevailing impunity makes it easier for business entities to forget their responsibility to respect human rights, which is embedded in Pillar 2. Company-based grievance mechanisms may be useful for preventing harm and facilitating resolution of minor problems. However, they can in no way replace state-based mechanisms in cases involving egregious violations. Of course, the best solution for a victim is to have access to an independent court where he or she lives. However, too often, the judicial system where the harm occurs is weak or unable to provide an effective remedy. This is why we also need to remind home states of multinational companies of their duty to protect and insist that they provide effective avenues to remedy in cases where host states lack the capacity or the will to do so. The UN Working Group could explore and recommend how home states, as part of their duty to protect, could facilitate access to justice for victims of human rights abuses in third countries involving corporations under their jurisdiction. It is a welcome development that the implementation of the UN Guiding Principles has become an issue for discussion at national, regional, and international levels. However, it is imperative that talk translates to reforms that effectively render corporations accountable and ensure access to justice and reparation for those affected. So, before I end, let's also not forget the 34 miners who were killed in South Africa last August in one of the worst shootings since the end of apartheid, and the 2 miners who were shot dead during a wage protest just weeks ago, also in South Africa. The 5 villagers who were shot dead last August in Guinea while protesting employment practices of a mining company. The 400 workers, incidentally about half this room, who were killed in garment factory fires in Bangladesh and Pakistan in recent months. The workers at an electronics factory in China who were pushed to suicide by harsh conditions. The people I have recalled to you are dead, but their voices must be heard at this important forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie Stothard. Our next speaker is Andrei Galaev, Chief Executive Officer of Sakhalin Energy Investment Company. Welcome.